So, Chris, let's turn to your interview with Jonathan Bailey. Jonathan Bailey is, of course, best known for his role on Bridgerton. He was the lead of the second season. He's also in season three, which is currently airing on Netflix. He's, I think, never been better than in Fellow Travelers, which is a miniseries I hope gets some love this Emmy season. He plays Tim Laughlin, who is this congressional staffer trained in the world of, 50s, 60s right wing America, who falls hard for another man played by Matt Bomer, a veteran staffer who's a bit more senior than him in the State Department. And their romance spans decades, and it's just really moving to watch. So, what did you guys talk about?
Yeah, I had a really wonderful chat with Jonathan Bailey, who's having a huge year between Fellow Travelers and Bridgerton and the upcoming Wicked movie, which we did talk a little bit about as well. But we really focused the conversation on his wonderful performance, his Critics' Choice Award winning performance in Fellow Travelers as Tim Laughlin. And really, it's really an epic romance and an epic series where he's got to portray Tim from, the 50s, sort of rigid, uptight Republican staffer working for McCarthy and transform over the course of decades on the series to like a radical queer man in the 80s and also play this love story opposite Matt Bomer, which, it's nice work if you can get it. And he absolutely did wonderful work in this show. So we really talked about what it took to portray this character in so many different eras and episodes of his life over the course of many decades. So it's really great.
Yeah, it's a real achievement. Well, let's get into your interview with Jonathan Bailey.
I want to talk about the work, obviously, but I got to know, how was the Met Gala on Monday? It's looked pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very special, and particularly because of the theme, it was kind of an ethereal sort of night, but it
Mm,
felt like everyone had a lot of fun, and
yeah.
it was particularly amazing because Jeff and Michelle and then Ari and Cynthia were there and they sang.
Yeah.
And I didn't actually know, I knew that Ari might be singing, but Cynthia jumping up on as well was just an iconic, incredible moment. And it just sort of harked back to, the epic diva duets of like the 80s and 90s. And
Hmm.
the whole room just took flight at that moment. So yeah, it was amazing.
Oh my gosh, it looked incredible. And seeing them, I mean, your Wicked co-stars, we must say, having the whole Wicked family there must have been really special. And to have Cynthia and Ari duet on one of the most iconic songs of all time, one of the most
Oh,
iconic duets.
also, one of my favorite, I think one of my favorite films, actually.
Oh, Prince of Egypt is incredible.
Yeah, stunning. Jeff and I had a little rendezvous after the performance. You realize just how spoiled we were to see them sing and be together,
Mm.
just generally, just their energies together. You forget that people are yet to witness it. And so it was a brilliant little taste of what's to come, I think.
Well, I am people, and I interviewed Cynthia and Ariana for the magazine, and their energy together is so electric. And I just imagine, I mean, you as you're the point of the love triangle, right? You sort of, as Fiero, you break them apart, you bring them together. What was that dynamic like during filming?
Yeah, it was amazing. I came in quite late because, well, I'd been filming Fellow Travelers and Bridgerton, so I hit the ground running, and it sort of served the story because we were doing the majority of the first film, which is the early years. So it was kind of nicely paced between me and Ari got our sort of prom king and queen that era.
Yeah.
And then me and Cynthia towards the end of the shoot came together for the stuff that happens later on. So yeah, it was great, but it's amazing really just to serve them throughout it, and it's going to be a game changer, I think, for them.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I have to ask before we move on from Wicked, talking to John Chu, he had no idea that you could sing until he went to YouTube and found videos of you singing online. Did you ever think that YouTube videos of your performances would lead to you landing a lead in one of the biggest movies?
No, of course not. I mean, no. And I've grown up loving musical films, and it's just bizarre when suddenly, you find yourself on a Zoom with John Chu, and John is just incredible. I mean, has the ability to, despite it being a huge studio experience, to create and preserve the feeling and ethos of like a workshop theatre as if there's only 4 people in the room. And as a result, I think he gets really incredible performances, and he just really loves and understands the musical form, I think. And so everyone who was invited in was basically a sort of theatre nerd. But when you find yourself suddenly on a Zoom and John's talking to you and Mark Platt comes in and they're like, we just wanted just to check about dancing, and then suddenly Ari and Cynthia jump in and they go, come to Shears. And you're like, this is just kind of, it's a whirlwind. But the fact that it was a YouTube video that got me the job is kind of wild and incredible. Yeah.
Well, I simply a huge musical theater nerd here, so I simply cannot wait for Wicked Part 1 and to go to Shiz University.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as you mentioned, you got to production late because you were working on Fellow Travelers. No singing, but really an incredible, incredible show. And given your arc as Tim, you go from this conservative, religious congressional staffer to like a radical queer man in the 80s. What was that character arc? How was filming that? Because I have to imagine, even if it was shot in chronological order, that would be tough to do. But going back and forth, I'm sure was really tricky.
Yeah, I mean, it was an incredible challenge. I think I remember the excitement of the fact that it had just been written. I just reading on the page, and that first episode, the pilot episode, I think was so incredibly moving and had so much sort of radical, actually nuance, I think. That's the thing that was radical about it, that there was space to see tiny micro emotional shifts between two white gay men, but then also I think the inclusion of the Marcus and Frankie storyline, when I read that, I was like, this is going to be really special because it's not a story about, gay people. It's not a story about wives who find themselves interlaced with gay people. It's not about race, but it explores all those things. It's really about humanity. And I think for Tim, talking about the idea of religion and faith and what that gives you at the beginning. And I think it seems to have equipped Tim to endure a love against all odds. And he never gives up on Hawk. And Hawk becomes his sort of living religion and something that he believes in. And I think was really exciting is that I was just like, I just want to see like a gay ingenue or a young male, who's a fish out of water, but he's itchy in his skin. It's like, it's not like he's doe-eyed and just sort of hapless. It's like he's fighting from the get-go. He does not understand why the world is the way it is. His emotions are the thing he leads with, and he's all about truth and transparency and honesty. And I think that comes from this Catholic sort of conservative upbringing. And so it's just the most beautiful quest that he has in his life to find sort of absolution, but also acceptance. But he never stops fighting. And that's why he's, to me, an absolute icon.
Yeah. Oh, he really is. I love what you just said about that itchiness, because Tim has that sort of energy. It's prickly, and he's struggling internally, with his sexuality at the beginning and discovering that. But then also there are all these external forces. We have McCarthyism, and then we go from that to the AIDS crisis. And I know, you're British, you're not from America, but there's a lot of history, American history that the show delves into.
Yeah.
How familiar were you with, the inner political workings of the 1950s in America? Was that new to you?
That, funnily enough, was not included in on the curriculum where I was on, but I'm not sure it really was in America either. And this is why when I'm shining a light on areas of history that conveniently haven't been included. But for me, what's amazing about this is it's an experience to explore a character throughout that time, but also the history of like queer experience to offer me as Johnny catharsis. And it's such an incredible invite. Like, there's just no doubt that to be able to go and, through an extraordinary showrunner, Ron Nicewainer, and incredible executive producers, and to be in a predominantly queer environment to tell that story. I relished it because there's so much that I need to understand about where, the privilege that I have now and the people that came before me. And, the fact that there's 5 out gay actors leading this show is because of all the people that came before. And I'm telling you, people have been loving gay actors for years. They just haven't been able to say that they're gay.
Yeah.
And in straight roles, predominantly. So that is in itself, the experience as me as an actor being a part of this is also exactly what Tim and Hawke are experiencing, that there's no right or wrong way to survive in an environment and, under a regime like McCarthyism, which tells you that you're not good enough. And then for Tim to have his real sort of chemical awakening in that environment and then to be dropped by the government again in the AIDS crisis and for everything in between, I just found it such an incredibly generous thing to be able to learn all of that and to understand so much more. But yeah, it was, anyway, I could go on and on and on about this.
No, I mean, it's really compelling. And I do love what you said about it being led by queer actors and made by queer people. And that even in 2024, we're getting more queer stories. We absolutely are seeing more queer representation on screen. It's not always portrayed by actual queer and gay people. And it does, I think Fellow Travelers shows, it makes a big difference when you cast queer, out, gay, LGBTQ, whatever umbrella you want to use, actors in roles that are queer.
And when, it's so specifically is exploring the queer experience over 40 years. So
yeah,
I think wasn't there a GLAAD report last week that was kind of disheartening about there's been a decrease in, queer or LGBTQ plus characters being represented. But, it's always going to be a conversation and a dynamic that needs to, but that is literally what privilege I understand it now to be. And that's what Tim and Hawke and all the characters in this are born into a world where they have to fight. And if you're ever having to monitor or adapt or to, if your first instinct is, it might not work because of who I am, then, that's the difference between being a gay actor and not being a gay actor.
I'm David Remnick, host of the New Yorker Radio Hour. There's nothing like finding a story you can really sink into that lets you tune out the noise and focus on what matters. In print or here on the podcast, The New Yorker brings you thoughtfulness and depth and even humor that you can't find anywhere else. So please join me every week for the New Yorker Radio Hour, wherever you listen to podcasts.
I mean, absolutely. You just mentioned, Tim and Hawke. The whole show actually does not work. It would not work for 1 second if your chemistry with Matt Bomer, if Tim and Hawke's relationship isn't absolutely crackling and absolutely electric. And guess what? It really is. What was it like working with Matt? How did you find that dynamic? There's like a sub-dom dynamic. It sort of switches. There's a power struggle. It's so complicated and nuanced and always believable and really hot, I'll say. So how did you figure that out?
Well, I mean, to start with Matt Bomer, who's just a sort of a supreme being and just incredibly lovely and great. And, he's got such a wealth of experience. By the time we met each other, we had met on Zoom to do a chemistry read. And then we met in a coffee shop like 6 days before we started filming. And we just, for about an hour, just said, this is the opportunity. This is what we're really excited about. But then it just allowed us to go and, it's just a great amount of trust and a free fall. But that's the point of like gay relationships, is that there is so much nuance. And the fact that the intimacy is so richly explored is so important to the gay experience, because there's something that I found really incredibly vital as well, is to allow people to understand the way that men, come together sexually is also directly linked to how the world communicates to them. And, their relationship with their self-worth, but their shame, and also literally where are the safe spaces that they can meet. And even in their own homes, they had, a window of however many hours until the sun came up and he had to get out. And so it's like, even there, it's unsafe. And so I loved that the intimacy had its own evolution.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love that you brought up intimacy. And I interviewed and talked to Daniel Minahan, who directed a bunch of the episodes, and Ron, who the showrunner. And they said that regarding the intimate scenes with Tim and Hawke and all the intimate scenes, they did not want to repeat the same thing twice. That there was like every single sex scene or intimate scene was distinct and separate. And they were joking. They were like, by the end of the show, we were like, we're sort of running out of ideas for what these guys can do. But it's such an important part of the show's DNA. And so, frankly, rare and novel to see, not only intimate scenes between queer men on television, but really believable, realistic, raw, just exciting, and never repeated intimate scenes. So what was that like? I'm sure as you're the one who has to pull them off. It's kind of a tall order.
Well, it's not. I don't know. I mean, personally, I just think what an opportunity. And there's also it's really exciting to be able to know that you've got the space to be able to show what you haven't seen before. And I remember Queer as Folk, and there've been beautiful Blue is the Warmest Color. There's been beautiful sort of same-sex intimacy explored. But I think in this instance, it was how the two characters came together was also directly reflective of what's going on inside, and the distance between what they really felt towards each other, what they felt like they could say, and also what they felt that they had to do in order to survive. That's where the intimacy is incredibly hot. And I think how Hawkins' sort of ability to compartmentalize and bifurcate and to dissemble emotion and intimacy out of the sexual act, and for Tim, really, that's all that's about. I think it's just a beautiful and very real thing, and it's not just a gay thing, but yeah, it didn't seem to me to be an overwhelming ask for the intimacy scenes. It felt to me that was exactly what it should be. If you're going to tell this incredibly bruising, tender, detailed love story that's going to, explore 4 moments in history, of course you should explore the intimate dynamics. And I do think you can show so much about what's happening with a human in those silent moments of intimacy. And that's why it's brilliant. And I can see where sex scenes don't further the plot and they don't explore character development, and they're cynically included. And with this, that was never going to happen because it was all on the page, and it's important.
Yeah, it is important. And it was so integral to the plot and to the character development and the dynamics. You couldn't divorce the two.
Exactly. But the commitment that's needed in order to pull those off, is matched by the commitment that's needed to pull off a character arc of 40 years. And especially with Tim, who evolves. And I just found it incredibly inspiring, actually, that his fight never dwindles. And he is always someone he's on a quest for truth and honesty and in his commitment. So
did you have a favorite era of Tim? Or was there because he goes through so many different iterations.
I think I loved, I mean, in the 60s, I felt like he was at his most, I feel like something happens in the 60s for him. He's so at odds with himself, but I just loved the fact that, he, you see him and, he's with Father Lawrence and he's trying to take on the Vietnam conscription papers, and I loved where he'd got to at that point, because it felt like he'd come to a dead end, really, and the decision to literally let the law take him away from Hawk so that he can to restart his life. I think that felt very extreme for Tim, that period particularly, and knowing that the world was, and seeing Hawkins and Lucy sort of sexually, the sexual liberation was happening in the 60s, and contraceptive pill had come in, and C&D, your hippie movement, and yet there was Tim just completely confined, trying to quell anything about himself that he still deemed sort of disgusting or he had shame about. And it felt to me that was quite an exciting character study, actually.
Yeah, that it was such an exciting time. And I loved how the show sort of had these moments of, darkness or difficulty, right, with Tim going through that in the 60s. And then we get, to Fire Island, the most sort of safe space, queer liberation.
Totally, yeah. And it literally blooms like a season. But also the thing about Tim, which is great, and I loved about Fire Island, is that, of course, he can still have a really good time.
It's still fun, yeah.
Yeah, he can still have a really good time. It's the contraction and then the blooming of queer culture that happens over time, and that cyclical nature of freedom versus oppression, and how that sort of can brutalize, but then also force about evolution in the queer people that have to endure it. But yeah, you're right. I obviously the Fire Island stuff was just really fun for me and Matt, because it was just, it was just pure joy. Being cut off pants with, 100 other men just sort of wriggling around.
That sounds like a good time.
It was a good time, but I know, there's always this underlying, it's just to have these rich characters that you can really lean into all of the hedonism and the joy of queer culture as well. knowing where the characters have come from and where they're headed to, I think.
Yeah, it's really it's kind of remarkable how the scope of the show, which does encapsulate so much of the joy, the fear. I mean, you mentioned the Marcus storyline in the intersection of race and sexuality, and then your character's untimely demise due to AIDS. To encapsulate all of that in one series,
and also to not see him die.
Yeah,
I thought was just a brilliant thing, because actually, we've seen that so many times in the years.
We've seen that before a lot.
I know. And actually he lives on, and it's the most brilliantly joyful final moment for Tim, that he comes in fighting and Hawkinson's telling him to stop, and he ends and he's fighting as well. And it's a character that I think actually has changed the way I see the world, actually.
Wow.
I really do think that.
How so?
Well, I mean, I was so bereft when I was literally doing the choreography for the Oslos Ballroom about 2 days later, so I didn't have much time to deal with it. But I was bereft, because when you sit with like playing a character that's just that and it's not just about being good; it's about questioning the right things, being focused in on the right things, and he's a life force, I think. And I just came away from that project going, I know more about myself and about why I am the way I am, and about the people that came before me, and how I can hopefully, it felt like a call to arms for me to make sure that the world is left in a better place. Every small act of kindness in a community like ours is an important one, I think.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And the whiplash to go from that to Oz Does Ballroom choreo, that's gotta make your head spin.
Well, I just remember Matt and we were in a 2-way trailer, and I came back and forth. I think there was about 33 days where I came back and forth to London to film Bridgerton and to go back to Canada, and I didn't have a day off. So I was going straight from the airports to set and back and forth. And then towards the end of that, I started, I did a big choreography session in London on a Sunday. And actually when I flew over, because my Osdust boots were made in Toronto in this amazing sort of shoe factory, and I went to go and visit it, and I picked up my boots, and they said, right, can you take these to your first rehearsal in London? Once you finish Bridgerton, you're on the Sunday, you're going to go in, do a 6-hour, just to get the basics, and then you'll come back. And I went and I took it in as hand luggage, and my suitcases didn't arrive. So all I had when I arrived were my Fiero boots. And there's a picture that I have of me in my pants in the Fiero boots on the first day of going into the Wicked rehearsal. And I went and I did 6 hours of dance, and I came back with my shiny boots. And then in every lunch break, and North American filming hours are crazy, but every lunch break I would just start going, and Matt would just come out and be like, he was like, Johnny, I just need to sleep. And it'd be half, but it was literally half Tim. So with my glasses and like with a hair, with a tie, and then down here was just like leg warmers. And it was fame from the waist down.
Oh, I love that. I need a photo of that. That is.
I've got terrible videos that may or may not surface in about 100 years' time. Hopefully once I've died, because they're so embarrassing. And I thought I was really getting the choreography, but the way you get to at the end, it was pretty special.
That is incredible. That is an incredible BTS, the making of.
But also, just think, because Tim, if he'd been born 60 years later, may have played Fiero in the school production of Wicked.
100%.
And he would have kept his hair, and he would have kept his glasses.
The glasses, he would have. Oh my gosh, he had such a big personality. He absolutely would.
And he would have loved the shiny boots.
He would have loved the hot pants, the shiny boots. Oh, he would have ate. Oh my God, Tim is Fiero. Now that is absolutely incredible. Oh my gosh, that was such an incredible story. I do want to know, just because it's so important. It's so wonderful when when work is recognized by the world. And congratulations on your Critics' Choice Award.
Thank you.
What did that feel like, having all the work, all of the love that you poured into this character, into this show, recognized in such a way?
Well, it felt incredibly special and out of body, actually. And it felt really sort of important. I remember when we started talking about Fellow Travelers, because obviously there was the strike, and we came to start talking about it once I think the first couple of or 3 episodes were out. And I remember thinking, you know what, if it felt sort of like a political move to to get it commissioned, when I first spoke to Ron Nicewell, he said, I've been working on this for 10 years and I think this might be on my life's work. And I said to him, whoever you invite to play this character, it will be their life's work as well. And I knew it then, and I know it now. And, you know, the executive producers, Dante De Laurento at Fremantle, our directors, we were surrounded by these amazing people that made it happen. And it felt political to say yes to do it, for everyone to greenlight it, to commission the scripts, but then for the actors to choose to do it. You know, after Bridgerton playing a straight lead, I was like, this is a brilliant way just to show. I just thought, I just want to show, just completely go exactly in the opposite direction.
Yeah, no, totally. Keep them on our toes. Keep us on our toes.
And then when we started talking about it, and then people had seen it, and then you realize it's an incredible story about humanity, and it's a celebration of that, and it's detailed, and it incorporates history, and it lends itself for us to understand the world that we live in now. But on top of that, it's a political act to support it and to identify it, and to then when you're starting to talk to journalists and doing a press tour, you realize that there were certain people that were like, I wanted to interview you for this. And it's the people and how activated people were to go, I'm going to support this and I'm going to get it. And you realize that it's a shame that a show like this needs that and relies on it, but of course it does, because it's that brilliant and it resonates in that way. So then to get an award for it, and to see that Matt being acknowledged and Ron winning, is it the Walter Bernstein Award? I think it's called.
Yeah.
And to hear his speech, there's so much passion and love. And it's not just about choosing a creative endeavor. This is about like pouring your life experience into it and the opportunity. So that's a really long way to answer that when you then get an award for it. And it's really emotional,
Yeah, that's really sweet. It's really encompassing not just your performance, which was wonderful, but all of the people that sort of pour into that.
Yeah, and I do think that it's a really, there's so many people who made this show happen, and the detail in the crafts, and Joseph Lecourt, who is the costume designer, and Michelle and Jordan, who did, there's just across the board, and it was just amazing to be able to step up and to accept an award that obviously is incredible as an actor, but it's really for everyone, and it's for the community.
Yeah. And I do feel Wicked will also be for the community in a completely different way.
Yeah.
Same community, different sort of itch that we're scratching.
Yeah, different flavors.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. You've been so lovely. And thank you so much, Jonathan, for
Thank you, Chris,
taking time out of your schedule to chat about all things, Wicked and Fellow Travelers.
I really enjoyed that. Thank you.